Hello, welcome to another session of This is Nampa, Community Engagement Interviews. I'm Sara Cobb, Library Associate here at the Nampa Public Library. The National Network Libraries of Medicine granted the Nampa Public Library funds through the NNLM All of Us Community Engagement Award last fall, so that we could launch the Be Well Nampa project. This funding allows the library to enhance access to existing health services by offering our space as a centralized, neutral location where we can facilitate providing trustworthy health, medical, and wellness information and services to our residents. The library is partnering with Treasure Valley Compassionate Therapy to provide free virtual counseling to Nampa residents as part of our Be Well Nampa project. Today we'll be talking with counselor Natalie Millett of Treasure Valley Compassionate Therapy about this wonderful new service available here to Nampa residents and learn more about mental and emotional health services and programs in our community. Welcome, Natalie. Thank you so much for being here with us today to talk about this really important topic. We're really excited here at the library to have you join us in this, and let's just get started. I'm going to ask you some questions. We'll just have a conversational style interview here. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your training and your credentials and about Treasure Valley Compassionate Therapy?
Sure, and thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Yeah. So I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Idaho, and I got my training at Northwest Nazarene University. So I'm a recent graduate from there, just finished up in May 2020, so it's an exciting jump into a new practice. So Treasure Valley Compassionate Therapy is one that I am the owner of and I founded myself. I always had a dream to start in private practice, but I just didn't know how that would come about, and opportunities just kind of fell into my lap, and it felt like the right time to launch a business. So that's kind of how that piece of it got started. Okay. At Northwest Nazarene University, that's where I studied marriage and family counseling. And along with that, I got an area of emphasis in grief and trauma crisis counseling. And so that's kind of more my niche. That's my area where I'm comfortable with. And I've met with a lot of clients who've experienced trauma or grief and loss. So for a year, we have a clinical experience, and I got to intern at a lot of different places. I had an eclectic experience. I met at a few clinics, and then also I interned at a few private practices. And so that's how I fell in love with that side of the work as well. So it was a great experience. I even interned at Nampa Family Justice Center, and so that's where I got some experience with more trauma, domestic violence, and those kinds of things. Would you tell us a little bit about the Be Well Nampa counseling service and what it is that you'll be offering to our community? Like you referenced earlier, it's free counseling for adults 18 and up, and it is primarily for residents in Nampa, Idaho, and those who have access to any kind of telehealth device. So that would be a computer, a phone, or an iPad, any one of those things that has internet access. They'd be able to have counseling with me through that. What's great about this project is clients will be able to get 8 to 12 sessions for free. It really just depends on their treatment goals and where they're at. If they're more in crisis, they may need more help in that regard within that range. So I would have to assess that as we go and work collaboratively with clients to see how they're progressing. Sounds great. And how do clients make an appointment with you through that program? Yeah, so the best place probably is through the library website. Okay. On the front page, you can see a little snippet about this program. And if clients were to click on that, then they'd access another page that would give them access to a calendar. And that's all private and secure. It's through a software that's HIPAA compliant. I utilize one that lots of therapists utilize. It's called Simple Practice. Okay. They would click on that, and then they could make their appointment with me, and only I would be able to see that. And then once a request is sent in, then I can okay it. So that's kind of a little bit of the process. Yeah, but that doesn't sound too complicated though. No. So great. So can you tell us a little bit about telehealth and how is a typical telehealth session run? What does it feel like for a client who's experiencing, a session with you? Because that's maybe a little different. Maybe people are more used to the thought of like an in-person therapy session, and they might be intimidated about doing telehealth. Can you explain a little bit more about that for us? Yeah, so first off, I'd like to just kind of squash some of those fears, just because some people do think, if we're doing telehealth, does that mean that things are secure? Is it safe? And like I said, I use the software that lots of therapists use. It is very secure from all that I've gathered and the research that I've read up on it, and so that's why I utilize that. but clients do have a role to play in therapy in telehealth that is a little bit more proactive when it comes to telehealth. So they would need to make sure that they're in a safe environment, they're not around family members or children, that they're private and alone, and that's for their own confidentiality's sake. And so I can assess some of that, and so on my end I know that things are professional and done in a private setting, but I can't always assure that on the end of the client. And so I think if clients just know that up front, then it can be a safe and a great environment. And speaking to the question a little bit more personally, I know it is hard for people to come in and use telehealth because they think, I'm not going to get the same kind of care, it's not going to be as personable, but I can say that the clients I've worked with have felt comforted and have felt that it is similar in a lot of ways. And I try to work around that because sometimes in session I would give a client some kind of resource, or we'd work through a worksheet together and it would be proactive that way. Through telehealth, I've kind of worked around that. I can share my screen with clients so they can see something that I'm talking about if it's a resource, or I can email them to an email that they're comfortable with. So that's kind of how we do it. It is a little different. But it's worth it. Yeah.
And it's so great for people who can't, for whatever reason, actually meet in person. Obviously, right now with this COVID situation, that's very difficult, if not impossible. And then for some people that may live more remotely, or they may be homebound, or something like that, having this option is just tremendous. It will allow them to have mental health help that they would, not be able to get otherwise. So
that's true. Yeah,
that's
it's more
really
convenient.
Great. Are there any other pros and cons you can think of doing telehealth versus in-person therapy that someone might want to consider before they decide if they want to move forward with therapy?
Yeah, for sure. So some of the pros, I think we kind of touched on a little bit of that, is just the convenience. They can access counseling in a way that they might not otherwise be able to. So my schedule is a little bit more open with telehealth sessions. I have more hours available, that kind of thing, so that neither of us have to worry about the commute and to the office and things like that. And then I talked about, how we can work around some of those issues of I can still offer resources. It just looks a little different. But the cons, for sure, for telehealth, there are some that I want clients to be aware of, that it can just be a challenge just collaborating at first. There could be technical difficulties that could happen. Luckily, I haven't run into much of that. Just as long as the client is able to check their internet connection before we start a session, they have the opportunity to click on the link that I send to them and then just type in their name. It's really simple, and from there just see the picture and see how it's functioning. And so yes, if technical difficulties come up, I try to make a plan with clients, like I'll call you on the phone, or this is how we'll reconvene, or we'll reschedule.
Right.
Just
so
that
plan sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah, those things are a part of it.
Right. Any other things people might need to know if they're going to participate with telehealth?
Just something that I like to reassure clients of is what's really neat with this program is when I send them a link, they don't have to download a software.
Oh, that's great.
And so they can just get right into the appointment and put their name in, and so it is more simplified than I think other processes.
What expectations do you have of a client who wants to work with you?
So with clients, I just hope that they'd be invested in the work, that they're encouraged to come and show up on time and be a part of what we're doing. I don't always offer homework. It really depends on the client and where they're at in their life, but if that's a part of it, again, it's wonderful to have clients come prepared, and then if they had to cancel, they would let me know at least 24 hours in advance. Right. And that can get really challenging with this program in specific. We're trying to help as many as possible. And so if clients are constantly on the schedule and cancel last minute, it's hard to work with more people. So that's something I encourage.
Do you have a policy on that?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So I do have a policy of 2 times. So if a client cancels last minute or is absent for 2 consecutive sessions, then I would need to send them referral sources so they could find help somewhere else, just so that we could continue forward in helping more with this program.
That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Natalie, could you tell us who might benefit the most from seeking out counseling services, and what kinds of issues does counseling best address?
With counseling, I always say this, that anyone can benefit from seeking counseling because people go through different life transitions. Often what I see are people coming in after having gone through a divorce or loss of a loved one, dealing with some of that grief and loss and going through that process and needing the support during that. And then, of course, I've had experience with people who've experienced trauma. Either they've witnessed it or they've had it happen in their life, and they're trying to figure out some coping strategies, some tools to overcome that. Anxiety and depression are common that we see. There's all kinds of mood disorders. People specialize in different areas. My specialty would be grief and loss and trauma, but with others, there are specialists that people seek out for children issues and diagnoses. And oftentimes counselors will go out and seek certification to specify themselves in a niche. And so it really depends on what you're looking for, but oftentimes counselors are trained in a whole gamut of what is common, like life transitions, anxiety, depression, that.
Right. So right now with this COVID pandemic going on, I would guess that maybe people are having more struggles than normal with their mental health. Are you seeing a rise in mental health issues? Are you seeing more people like maybe seeking out counseling because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think there are definitely, and some are a little deterred by it as well because they're so wrapped up in their life and just trying to function day to day. So I think it just depends on the person that's seeking counseling. Okay. But what I have been seeing with some of the clients that I met with in internship and leading now into my professional career is that clients are struggling more with anxiety and depression. It's just It's either if they've had a little bit of it, it's become a little worse, and so they're just seeking support for that. Probably the population I'm seeing that's getting hit pretty hard with all of this are parents. They're juggling roles at home with their children now, and then having to balance their work life on top of that. And I'm a working parent, so I get that on a personal level. It can be really challenging. So I think those are the ones that are seeking out help for just self-care. Like, how do I take care of my mental health amidst all these changes?
Yeah, it's a difficult time right now, I think, for everybody. So we can all use a little extra support for sure with our mental and emotional health, and finding some of those coping skills and mechanisms that you mentioned that, will help us kind of keep going and keep moving forward with some hope in our lives. So that's important. Yeah. What are some of the options for continuing counseling with you if for some reason they get through the free sessions and they feel like they still need some help? What can a client do to continue to work with you, or what would you recommend as far as like transitioning out of these free sessions into some other kind of treatment if needed?
Yeah, that's great. I would love to continue on with clients. If there's a need and there's room in my schedule, I would love to make that work. And what I would do with clients is just kind of assess as we're getting closer to the end. So we'd have a few sessions before termination that I would prepare clients, and we'd talk about options. I'm very communicative with my clients. I like them to feel like they know what's coming next. And so in that process, I would either give them referral options to places in the Valley if there's no room in my schedule, or I'd let them know about how that would look moving forward financially, because I know that's a concern for some, and we'd make something work.
Yeah, I know a lot of therapists offer like a sliding scale option or some sort of payment plans or things like that. So I'm sure that that's probably something that you could work with. Are there some activities or tools that you would recommend for people to do that will help them kind of protect their mental health, especially in this kind of time where we're really all struggling?
Yeah, so the first one I'd give is just, I'd wrap back around to self-care. I know that it seems simple, but it's not in action. And that encompasses their physical health, their emotional, their spiritual, as well as their relationship health. And that's not even just relationships with family members or those close to them, but also the relationship that they have with themselves. And so I would suggest making a self-care plan in each of those categories, thinking of just one simple thing that they can do to boost each of those areas of their life. Balance is a big key to that. And I'm a huge advocate of mindfulness, and mindfulness is a technique of just living in the present moment. So with the clients I've been seeing that are struggling with more anxiety, they're ruminating and fearful of the future, and those who are struggling with depression are thinking about things of the past. And so that mindfulness piece is practicing living in that present moment and being okay with emotions as they come and accepting them and moving through them. And so there are lots of great tools on even YouTube or websites that people can go and find mindfulness meditations, and they can sit for a few minutes a day and just do that before they either start their day or end their day. That's something I encourage.
Are there any favorite books about mental health that you have, since we are at a library?
Going along the lines of mindfulness, there's a book out there, it's called The Happiness Trap, and it's by Russ Harris. And he's a mindfulness guru himself, and so it's a mindfulness-based book, and it helps people with their psychological flexibility. So it's helping people not be so fearful of things in the future and to work through some of that. And he gives some great tools and tips in that book. So that's one that I'd suggest. And then there's some that are like more pertinent to specific problems. And so right now people are struggling with their relationships as they're closer to family members. than they ever have been before. A great person to look at some of those relationships, either negative cycles or struggles that people are having in those relationships, is to seek out any books by Dr. Sue Johnson. Okay. She's fantastic. She's the founder of this therapeutic technique. It's called emotionally focused therapy. I've done a little bit of training in that. I hope to continue pursuing more advanced training, but the first book that she wrote, I believe, or at least one of the first ones, is called Hold Me Tight. That's a beautiful one to read. And then for parents, because I know parents are struggling too, I have a one in mind that I've heard a lot. It's been referenced to me several times in grad school. It's called Parenting with Love and Logic, and that one's by Foster Cline and Jim Fay, I believe it is. But yeah, so those are great books to check out.
Yeah. Are there any local Nampa and Treasure Valley area resources for mental health and emotional health that you can recommend?
I've heard great things about Terry Riley. I know they have health and mental health services provided at a low cost or sliding scale fees. Other low cost places I can think of are Refuge Counseling Center. I know they have more of a Christian lens if people are looking for that, to tie in spirituality into their counseling experience. Even NNU, the counseling department, they have a program, it's called Families ETC, and there's interns that run it. They do a great job. Again, they have services at a sliding scale fee, and I believe they see children and families and couples as well as individuals. And those are some, and of course the Nampa Family Justice Center. I'll throw a shout out to them. They do a great job.
They're great. Too. Any recommendations for resources about grief and loss?
Yes, there is one that I just came across. In fact, in this last week, it's called My Grief Connection, which I just found out you're the founder of.
I am, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I have just been going through that website. In fact, in the last few days, more specifically, I'm amazed by the amount of work that you've put into that and the amount of resources. I love that there's hotline crisis numbers for people to have all in a list right there. And in specific, I've seen that you've updated a page on COVID-19 grief, as there's quite a bit going on with all of that. I would say that is probably the best one I have found.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I think that's all the questions I have for you today, Natalie. We just really thank you so much for coming in to chat, sharing about yourself and about the library's new virtual counseling service, and just the importance of mental health and taking care of our emotional and mental wellness. So we thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.